Before becoming a famous TV chef, she worked for the CIA. This is the story of how a world-famous chef we all know and love started out as a CIA agent. Julia Child was born on August 15, 1912, in Pasadena, California. When the U.S. entered World War II, Julia was 29 years old and wanted to volunteer her services to her country. But at 6'2", she was too tall to serve in the military. Undeterred, Julia joined the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services.
Baseball may just be a sport, but one baseball player may have helped save the world. Moe Berg was an accomplished baseball player for 15 years in the 30s and 40s, but he was also a spy in World War II. Before the CIA, there was an organization called the OSS, and Moe Berg was its star. His life is the focus of a new documentary called The Spy Behind Home Plate. And recently I asked filmmaker Aviva Kempner if Moe Berg was the real-life James Bond.
He was in the OSS, and what people don't know, but is in the film, that the creator of James Bond, Ian Fleming, actually helped Wild Bill Donovan develop the whole plan for the OSS. It's a couple scenes in the movie. So the whole aspect of the OSS that would put men and women in, safecrackers, Ivy League people, and someone with brain and brawn like Moe Berg, also created in the input by Ian Fleming, who created James Bond.
The OSS, by the way, was the precursor to the CIA, and we didn't have a spy system back then. So Moe Berg was kind of like something unique. He spoke 10 languages, he had a law degree, charismatic, a baseball player, a perfect cover to travel the world, and he did just that, promoting baseball alongside some of the greats like Babe Ruth.
You know, the joke was he spoke 10, maybe 12 languages, but couldn't hit in any of them. But actually, in the 15 years he played, he hit 243, which is a pretty good utility player. And when you talk about Babe Ruth, in 1934, there was a very famous trip of an all-star team, except for Moe, he was an all-star, but it was Babe Ruth, Jimmy Fox, Lefty Gomez, Lou Gehrig, Charlie Gehringer, all went to Tokyo under the guise of a goodwill trip. But I think it was really America's last chance to sort of reach out to Japan. And when Moe was there, he did a certain clandestine filming of the Tokyo skyline on, I think, his own volition. But you have to see the film to see if he didn't think he had maybe some others encouraging him to do it. And this was footage used later in the Doolittle raid.
And so that footage was used by the U.S. military at some point.
Well, to scope out, you know, exactly what the skyline looked like. And they also asked for footage because Lefty Gomez and Jimmy Fox were also taking footage. So the trip may, in a way, help prepare for that.
Well, that's the thing, is I think that there are a lot of baseball Hall of Famers that were rightly credited with their contributions to World War II. But I would say that Moe Berg's contributions, as clandestine as they were, may have been as, if not more, impactful.
Well, his role was as a spy for nuclear espionage. We were terrified. America was terrified, and the Allies. The Germans had the capability to also create a nuclear bomb. We already had started the Manhattan Project, but we didn't know this outstanding physicist who would have had the brains and knowledge to do it, named Heisenberg. Moe was sent on this clandestine mission to go hear him talk, to see, and also talk to him after his lecture to see if there was any way the Germans were creating the nuclear bomb. Because, you know, it was a race until the end. Although the final irony was that the German physicists who knew most about how to create a bomb were Jewish and already, like Einstein, already had left Germany. But we still didn't know for sure. And Moe was the one that really secured the knowledge and, you know, sort of did the spying to find out what Heisenberg knew by going to Zurich, pretending he was a Swiss student, and he had a cyanide in one pocket and a gun in another pocket.
Werner Heisenberg, the pioneer of quantum mechanics, might have been one of the few men in the world that could have taken that fission technology and created an atomic bomb. And it was really up to Moe to determine whether or not that was possible. So you had to get in there, pretend to be someone else, be able to speak another language, and have the knowledge to identify the charts as whether or not he was telling the truth, whether or not the Germans were even close to an A-bomb.
And he had briefed himself. I mean, he had the type of brain who could absorb everything from physics to Sanskrit. So he was exactly the right person at the right time for us to use.
You tell stories that are the untold stories, more or less, of Jewish heroes and their contribution to history. Why did Moe Berg's story gather your attention as great as it did?
Well, I grew up in Detroit always hearing about Hank Greenberg. He was my father's hero. And the day and hearing about how he almost broke Babe Ruth's record and didn't play baseball on Yom Kippur. And the day Hank died, I knew I had to do the film on Hank Greenberg. Moe presented itself another way. Someone who had been a minor funder of my other films said to me one day, Aviva, do a film about Sid Luckman, who was the Jewish football player. And I said, Bill, I don't like football. And he says, what about Barney Ross? And I said, I hate boxing more, a Jewish boxer. But when he said Moe Berg, I love baseball. And I said, I've got to do it. Here we combine, you know, again, the golden age of baseball, which I'm fixated on. Someone who used his cleverness and his wit and also his knowledge of languages to spy on the Germans. And I don't think people know enough about the Manhattan Project because it was so secret, but sort of the spies that went along with it. And it's just great to be able to tell the story of Moe Berg, who sacrificed not only his life, but also his professional baseball coaching career to go off and spy for us.
Sounds like a great story until you actually have to go in there and do the research. And now you're talking about someone that passed away 50 years ago, didn't leave any children behind. In the 30s and 40s, any kind of documentation for his would have been burned up, erased, eliminated. And on top of that, he was literally a spy. So how do you do the research? How difficult was it to research this?
Well, I benefited from three things. One is the fact that 30 years ago, two filmmakers, Neil Goldstein and Jerry Feldman, were trying to make a film on Moe and film people like Dom DiMaggio, people Moe played with, and like William Colby, people who were in the OSS or spied with him. And I was able to process those interviews and use them in the film. Second of all, the OSS documents have been declassified, so they're more accessible. But third of all, even though Moe didn't marry, his siblings kept a lot of his documents, and between the Columbia Law Library, Princeton Library, New York Public Library, Cooperstown, his cousin Erwin Berg, I assure you there's a lot more pictures in libraries. There's so many scenes in the film that show him at different times, not so much talking, but him in certain places. And he's always sort of like the chameleon in the back. And I think that's a lot what Moe was. He was sort of observing the scene and then figuring out what could be done cleverly to get to the next step.
And this was a time when anti-Semitism was rampant. He was one of the first Jewish people to actually participate in an Ivy League school, as a matter of fact.
But that's actually where he faced the anti-Semitism. At Princeton, there was this whole thing about Jews were called Hebrews, couldn't participate in the dining clubs. Although since he was a star on the baseball team, they did let him be there, but they wouldn't let others there. In a way, Moe did not face the anti-Semitism that I saw evident in making the Hank Greenberg film, because every time Hank went up to bat, there was someone on the opposing team or in the stands yelling at him. But still, Moe had a very restrictive time at Princeton because he was Jewish.
Do you think that his motives were driven by his love for his heritage or his love for his country?
I think Moe was. I think Moe's motive to spy for the U.S. was both based on the fact of what...
Now, the reason the Manhattan Project is called the Manhattan Project is, as the program was first getting started out, their initial offices were in and around New York City. But in late 1943, the headquarters of the Manhattan Project moved down to a town that would eventually be named Oak Ridge, Tennessee. This was not a town that had existed before. It was created specifically for the Manhattan Project. From the time that they began construction of the plants and the support facilities in late 1942 through mid-1945, Oak Ridge's population exploded to nearly 80,000 people, and the town was using more electricity than New York City. Oak Ridge's purpose was to enrich uranium for the first atomic bomb ever used in combat. And massive plants were created in order to do just this. Thousands of people were recruited from all over, and the vast majority of these people had no idea what it was specifically that they were working on. Many of these people were recruited right out of high school. Dot, one of the women in my book, grew up in rural Tennessee. She was walking the halls of her high school her senior year when she was approached by a recruiter who asked if she might be interested in some war work in another part of the state. So she took a very simple test, answered some questions, and off she went. She was not told before arriving in Oak Ridge what she was going to be doing, and once she arrived, she was not told what the project was working on.
Then, in the aftermath of his grief, Feynman was forced to confront the reality of what he had helped create. Feynman was deeply disturbed by the knowledge he had contributed to the deaths of so many. In the months after this double trauma, first losing his wife, then realizing the destruction he'd helped unleash.
Welcome to the Cryptoteacher, and guys, you know I come back with that video just to make you think. And basically you've seen a few clips of actors and actresses and athletes as spies. And we know that it's 10 times worse for the last 20 years than it was back then. You have actors and actresses that are spies the same way you have it in athletics. We know that ex-FBI, CIA agents are inside of athletics. You can look on the bench and the coaches. You can tell some of them don't supposed to be there. Now, getting over to the atomic bomb. Now, we saw how they recruited young people, same way they recruit now, young kids that go into the military. The reason why, because they have no consciousness. They don't know what they're doing. Now, you had a scientist who's brilliant and didn't know exactly where he was taken to. So that's the reason why you must understand history and understand that the New World Order has a plan. You can be inside that plan and not even understand it. So if we look at all the jobs out here now, for the past 20 years, everybody's been a worker bee towards their plan. You're not thinking you're working for the New World Order, but you are. I don't care what you're doing. You're working towards the New World Order's plan. Whether your job is an avenue to distract people, or whether your job is to get people in. You know, so if I'm working for Google or Facebook, I'm here to tie people in, change your mindsets. But guys, we're all worker bees somehow, unless you do what? Bring in consciousness, make people aware of their surroundings. And that's what I'm here for, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Have a wonderful day.